What's up guys, it's a new sensation, Bigger Notation here, and today I wanted to break down the two regionals that I entered over the last weekend, as well as the winner box tournament that I entered, which all took place in Birmingham at the UK Games Expo. And I also want to apologise for the lack of content recently on the channel, other than the games that I've been uploading from my streams recently. I've been very busy. In my spare time has basically been taken up completely by either streaming or editing down the streamed games, and also testing for these regionals that have come up. But I've also moved out, hence the new background, so moving over stuff has taken a lot of my spare time as well. But hopefully now that I've got all of that out the way, the regionals are over, I'll be able to start putting out dedicated content for the YouTube channel rather than just uploading gameplay from the streams. And I'll still be streaming and uploading the gameplay, but I just want to be able to keep putting out more content for you guys to watch because it's something I really enjoy doing. But getting straight into the video, so the structure of the weekend in Birmingham was the Friday was the first regionals, and then the Saturday there was nothing going on officially, but then there was a winner box organised by Josh from Team Deck Planet, and I think a store that he knows locally or from buying stuff from them. Together they'd organised and promoted this winner box event so that people had something to do on the Saturday. And then on the Sunday there was the second regionals at the same place at the UK Games Expo as the Friday. And I had brought with me Blue BOUJACK, obviously. I really wanted to play Blue BOUJACK in at least one of the regionals just to prove that it wasn't a fluke and the deck can still perform. It's still a very strong deck, and it wasn't just like a one-time thing that will happen once and then the deck fades out into non-existence. And also it's the deck that I enjoy playing most. And I also brought a couple of other decks with me. I wanted to play Slug Mill just as a little bit of a meme if I did well on the first day. But I also brought AOD, and the reason behind that was because I thought AOD was a really good meta cool for this current format, because it does really well into Cell, because it can counterplay all of their 1-drops, stop them going up the chain, and the Super Namekian Slug can also stop a lot of their draw power, because they draw a lot off of their leader because they're seeing two new cards every turn once they're awakened. But they're also drawing a lot off of their Unison and their 4-drop chain, where they go up into the 4-drop from deck and then draw 2 cards. All of their 1-drops are drawing cards, the 1-drop androids, so the Super Namekian actually does quite a lot into them. And it also performs extremely well into Trunks Jita, because you can counterplay all of the 3-drops that come in when they're evolving. But the main reason it does extremely well into Trunks Jita is, again, the Super Namekian Slug. Because if they're bringing out 1-drops off of their leader, then they're not able to draw off of the 1-drops anymore, so they're effectively missing out on their leader draw if they're playing like that. But most of the time they'll just start drawing off their leader normally if they see the slug come down. But the main reason is, if you have Super Namekian on the board in rest mode, they can't legally EX evolve their 3-drops anymore, because the draw 1 is part of the cost of the EX evolve. And so I thought AOD was a very good meta cool, specifically to counter those two decks. It can struggle a little bit more into U7 because U7 has inherent barrier removal with the 4-drop Vegeta. But if they don't drop that turn 2, then you're generally okay. And I played against a U7 as well, and they dropped the Vegeta on me turn 3 both games, and they went first both games, and I still managed to win both of the games. But we'll be breaking that down when we get to the AOD segment. And I also want to say I am going to be releasing properly dedicated deck profiles for both of these decks, hopefully over the next week, to try and go more in depth with my card choices and just why I picked the decks in general as well. So if you guys are more interested in one of the specific decks, definitely stay tuned for that. This is going to be more of like a matchup breakdown where I go over my matchups for each of the days, and that's pretty much going to be it, yeah. Just going over matchups for the days and explaining how I played against each matchup. So to kick things off, I ended up taking Blue BOUJACK on the Friday. I was extremely tired on the Friday. I was on 3 hours sleep, so I wanted to take something I was a little bit more comfortable with and then test out AOD on the Saturday to see how it did, to see if I wanted to play it for the Sunday. So I ended up taking Blue BOUJACK for the Friday. And round 1, I was actually paired against the red Vegeta baby deck, the one that can take a life to -5k on a battle card, so it has inherent self-awakening as well as the standard just attack, draw 1 auto. And it was a very, very interesting deck. I don't really know what the deck does because I wasn't really playing when baby stuff was popping off around, I think, set 8 it was. I kind of took a break from the game around that time. So he actually managed to take game 1 off of me. I think a big reason for that was because I didn't see a unison throughout the entire game, I don't think. And we got to turn 8 of that game, and I didn't see a unison for the entire game. So he did manage to take a game off me with that, which made me a little bit nervous to try and finish up the rest of the games quickly, because Blue BOUJACK, as is very well known, it takes a very long time to finish up its games. But we managed to take back the other 2 games, managed to draw the Boo Unison. Boo Unison just puts up a lot of work into that matchup because they have the big triple strikers, but they don't have any protection on them. So if they ever want to swing with the triple strikers, you just Boo -1 it and it's gone. And so it wasn't a matchup that I was expecting to play against, so I kind of had to learn on the fly. But the Boo Unison just really puts in work into that. And if you ever play against Red Vegeta Baby, that's kind of how you beat it, just draw Boo Unison. Then round 2, I was actually against U7. And this is the main reason I was main decking that 1 copy of the Dirty Burst that you can see in the list here. Because the U7 matchup is kind of a pain to deal with game 1 at least, when you don't have the Dirty Burst sided. And I'll show off the side deck here as well, just to make it clearer. So the 2 Dirty Bursts in the sideboard are mainly for U7 as well, but the Dirty Burst also has a little bit of application into other matchups, like against Cell or Trunks Cheater if they're running the 8-drop package. And so yeah, game 1 against U7 tends to be quite tricky, but this U7 ended up being a lot easier than I expected. He didn't end up dropping any unisons on me. I don't know whether that was because he milled them, or he wasn't running them, or he just didn't think it was the right play at the time. I can't remember whether he milled any or not, because I was not really paying attention to that part at the time. But yeah, and he dropped the secret rare both games, but we just managed to play around it pretty fine. And it was honestly a pretty easy game. U7 isn't the worst matchup for this deck at all, because you have a lot of removal and you can just take out their battle cards, and then once they've burnt through all of their after images, you can just start killing them, because the deck really doesn't have that much defense outside of the unison package and the after images. So once the unison is cleared off the board and the after images are gone, you just start killing them. And so we managed to 2-0 the first U7 of the day. I don't believe we didn't end up playing any other U7s that day, and we only played 1 U7 on the Sunday as well. There wasn't much U7 this time around, which was a surprise. I expected there to be a lot more. And then round 3, we were against the SS4 Vegeta ramp deck from Josh from Team Deck Planet. Shout out to Josh. Great player, lovely guy. And he was also the main man organising and promoting the box tournament on the Saturday. And we were having a good time playing that game. I've never played against Vegeta Ramp with BOUJACK before, honestly, so I wasn't sure how the matchup would go. But luckily for me, it seemed to go pretty well. I managed to win the match 2-0. And just being able to free combo out of most of the leader swings that come my way, unless he slams a UI Goku's extra card on it, made the matchup extremely easy. And it's just I think it's a very good matchup for you when you're playing Blue BOUJACK. And especially the ability, like, you can just leave them on 8 life for most of the game, because you don't get much value out of swinging to their leader. Unless you're swinging crits, obviously, which is what I did during game 1. But game 2, he was on 8 life going into like turn 7 or turn 6, I think. And then I started to pressure him once I knew that I could drop Turning the Tide. But when SS4 ramp hasn't awakened, they can't really put on as much pressure as they can when they have awakened, because the leader auto to restand after you counter does a lot of the that is where a lot of the pressure of that deck comes from. And even when they have awakened, BOUJACK doesn't really have many negates. It's mostly just kind of free combo out of the swings, so that auto never really put on as much pressure as it could have for me. So we managed to win that 2-0. Also, to note, it was a best-of-3 tournament, which I forgot to mention earlier, but hence why 2-1, like I'm saying 2-1 and 2-0, because it was a best-of-3 regionals. All of the tournaments that I entered over the weekend were best-of-3. And that also means that we had full access to the side deck, but only after game 1, which is why I've got a couple of main-boarded techs, such as the Dirty Burst and the Kale. But we'll be going over that in the dedicated deck profile for each of the decks as well. Round 4, I was against Blue Baby Mill, and this matchup was really kind of a struggle because Blue BOUJACK, it thins through its deck very quickly with all of the free combos and all of the draws that it can do off of Boo Unison and all of the 1-drops and the Zangias. So Mill is generally quite a tricky matchup, and it doesn't really have a way to push through against all of the counters that Blue Baby has, even with the errata to the Planet Tuffle, because he wasn't putting any battle cards onto his board for more than a turn, really. But we managed to take the game 2-0 anyways. Game 1 was just getting to turn 7 and Turning the Tide as soon as possible, because I assumed that he wasn't main decking the 2-drop Jiren to counter it. And then I kind of assumed that he would be side decking it because Android 17 is probably quite a big counter to the style of deck that he was playing. So I decided not to rely on the Android 17 going into game 2. And then in game 2 he was pressuring me a lot more. Game 1 he didn't really hit me at all, and I stayed on 6 life. He mainly just played towards the mill win condition. And then game 2 I think he switched it up. He was looking to try and pressure my leader a lot more and take me down lower life, which was honestly much better for me because it meant that I could get more value out of his swings on my turn, whereas him game 1 he was swinging to my Unison, so I couldn't be free comboing or anything. And he ended up dropping a Kale to clear a massive board that I kind of accumulated whilst he'd been floodgating me out. And he started pressuring my leader, and I used that to build up another board. And then going into my next turn, I decided to leave the Kale on his board so that his counters weren't reduced. And then I started pushing and pressuring with the board that I built up. I think there was also a time where I tapped 6 for my Boo Unison at one point during the match, just so that I could make sure that it survived, because blue versus blue matchups is often just whoever's Boo Unison survives is going to be in a much better spot than the other. So I just made sure that my Boo Unison could survive much easier. And so once he had that Kale on board, I kept on pressuring because his Planet Tuffle was turned off. And so even though I was dropping, during my turn I was dropping a couple of 4-drop BOUJACKs, but I was choosing not to bottom deck the Kale every time, so that his Planet Tuffle was turned off and he only had, I think, 2 energy to play with. And this was all during game 2, and so that meant I'd had access to my side deck here. And I'd sided in the 2 Baby Golden Avenger to try and help pressuring, as well as the 3 East Kai, which had caused him a lot of trouble in the early game. But he dropped an Oceanus on me when he had the Kale on board, and I baby aped it so that the the counter attack didn't go off. And then I think he had 1 or 2 energy still left up, but because of the Planet Tuffle turning off, his reduced cost of the counterattacks in his hand, he wasn't able to use any of the floodgates in his hand, like the Gohan Baby's minion or the Vegeta Ready to Rumble, because he didn't have the energy anymore because of the Kale, and that meant that I was then able to kill him on that same turn. And so then going into round 5, I was against Red Jiren, and I was also happened to be against my teammate Jamie over on Scrub Games, who was also undefeated at this point. And shout out to him, obviously. I'm sure he'll have a tournament breakdown similar to this on his channel with how he did with Red Jiren over the first day, and then Blue BOUJACK over the second day is what he ended up playing. But we actually played on stream, and there were some really good games, but he did manage to beat me. I managed to take a game off him, so it was 2-1. But game 1, I managed to win I think I won the dice roll. Yeah, I did win the dice roll. I didn't see a Unison all game, but I did see Baby Hatch, and that was just enough to be able to mean that I could overextend one turn without getting punished, and then just Baby Hatch, and then when it came back to my turn, I could pressure enough to kill him. Game 2, he went first and just completely smashed me. I think I was dead on 2 energy or 3 energy. I just didn't have any of the resources that I needed to survive his attacks. And game 3, I definitely misplayed a couple of times with like some Xeno super combos and Galactic Buster misplays. But I also didn't see a Unison again until turn 4. So throughout the entire match, I did not get to play a Unison, which sucked a lot, even though I made it to turn 4 twice. But that's just the way it goes sometimes, and Jamie definitely played it extremely well. And check out, I'm sure he'll have like a deck profile or something up, so check it out, and I'll put a link in the description. But that was my first loss for the day. And it was definitely some great games. Round 6, I was against Raditz, and this was an interesting matchup because I wasn't sure how it would go. Hand control tends to do very well into BOUJACK, but he wasn't playing the Bardock Paternal Unison at all to shut me down, so that meant that I could still play the game, and his hand was dwindling about as much as mine was because he wasn't drawing any cards to mitigate for my hand destruction. And it meant that every time he was swinging to warp cards out of my hand, I was then able to free combo and start building up a board, which meant his Unison never stuck, and I was actually able to just pressure him enough to kill him. We did side in the 2 Deburas, just so that in case he was using any Ribrians or Cells Earth-destroying Kamehamehas, I was able to keep my hand healthy, even though a lot of his hand destruction is warping stuff. So we managed to take that match 2-0, just off of the pure pressure that the deck was able to put out every time he swung. And also the Unisons in that matchup are extremely helpful, just because otherwise I'm not going to be able to awaken, because I want to stay on high life if possible so that he can't pressure me with the triple attack crit thing. And so just using my Unisons to awaken is very, very important. And I think both games I managed to see my Gotenks Unison, which was huge because it meant that I could play the Gotenks Unison, draw 2 off of the Gotenks Unison -2, and then awaken and draw another 2, and use my double leader activate battle to either build up another board or draw more cards off of Zangia's in energy. So there was a couple of times where I'd draw like 6 cards in a turn after having 1 or 2 cards in hand, which was really, really insane. Round 7, I was against my first Trunks Jeter of the day, and I really hate this matchup. It's one of the most grueling matchups that the Blue BOUJACK has, and is definitely always going to be a long one. I don't know how favorable it is. It's kind of 50-50, I think, but I always feel like it's favored towards Trunks Jeter, just because of how complicated it is to play, and how long it takes as well. So this match ended up going 1-0 to me, just because time ended up being called on our second game, and so because I had won the first game, I took the win. And I mean, the main MVPs in that matchup are always going to be Kale and Android 17, and that is exactly how I won that matchup. Turn 7, I dropped Kale to clear his board, and then he built up a little bit of a board, but because he didn't have the Trunks blocker out, I was able to safely drop the Android 17 without it getting rested, and without him having enough defenses to survive. And so I just dropped Android 17, his board had, or the impactful cards on his board had already gone from the Kale, and then his hand was gone to stop him defending from Android 17, and I'd been pressuring him throughout the game just to get him. I think I had him on 2 or 3 life by that point, and so I was just able to swing with the Android 17 and then swing with a couple of other guys on the board and just take the win. And then game 2, I'd been pressuring him. By the time time was called, he was on 1 life. I don't know how the game would have played out, to be honest, because time just kind of makes things completely different, but there were some good games regardless, and Android 17 is just kind of a ridiculous card. But that was, I think, the only time that I've dropped Android 17 throughout the entire tournament. Oh no, never mind. I dropped Android 17 round 4 against the Blue Baby Mill once as well. But yeah, going on to round 8, this was another stream match, and it was me versus the only undefeated in the tournament, because we weren't playing with the 1 undefeated rule. And I was against yet another Trunks Cheetah, but this build was a lot different. It was more aggressive with the Super Namekian package, and it was very interesting to play against, and I've played against this particular opponent before in the Leeds Fest, and he was definitely the closest match by far on that day. And again, it was a really, really close set of games. Game 1, I managed to take it. because he'd spent so much resources protecting his Super Namekian, and then eventually I was able to draw the Gotenks Unison and just clear the Super Namekian off the board, and then all of his resources had kind of gone into nothing. And he also hadn't been backing up the Super Namekian with a Trunks blocker, either because he hadn't seen it or he just didn't think it was the right play, but it meant that I was able to pressure it a lot easier. Game 2, he completely destroyed me. I tapped out on my turn 4 going into his turn 5, which was a big mistake. I should have left one energy open, just so I had access to some free combos and stuff. But then he had a massive blowout turn where he dropped a load of stuff, pressured me, and then Cell Xeno'd me on top of it and just killed me. And then game 3 was really close as well. It ended up going to time, but by the time time was called, he was already on 1 life, and I think I was on 7 still by the end of the game. And so he just scooped it up because he knew that he wasn't going to win the game. And even if it came down to it, the time deciding who won, he was on 1 life and I was on 7, so it would have been either way. He probably would have lost, but I was pressuring him enough to probably just kill him in the turns that time allowed us to have with the extra 3 turns. But there were some really, really good games, and shout out to Axel because he plays the deck like no other Trunks cheater that I've seen. It's really interesting to play against because his build is like super aggressive. But that was the Friday, so the Friday ended up taking me to a 7-1 finish and finishing at 4th place. Sadly, I was the lowest out of the X1 finishes. There were 4 players who were X1, ranging from 1st place to 4th, and so it came down to tiebreakers. I ended up being 4th, which wasn't too bad of a hit for me because the only extra prizing that there was between top 4 and higher was in the 1st place, because 1st place gets a bonus mat and a couple of extra winner stamped cards and stuff. But between 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, there's no different in the prizing, so I wasn't too bothered about it. And then going into the Saturday, this was the Winner Box tournament organised by Griffin Gaming, I think, or Griffin Games, and Josh from Team Deck Planet. So shout out to those guys. They put on a great tournament, and it was really enjoyable. Round 1. So going into this tournament, I decided to play AOD as well instead of Blue BOUJACK because I needed a break from Blue BOUJACK. I was exhausted, and the deck takes so much thinking. It's really hard to play. I didn't want to put myself through it again, and I just wanted to test AOD to see if it would be the deck I played for Sunday, because I wanted to try and play something different on the Sunday as well, just so that I could make sure that I'm not just known for playing Blue BOUJACK. I want to make sure that I'm known for playing all kinds of things, you know. And so we took AOD to the winner box, and round 1 I ended up having a bye, so nothing really much to say there. Just got a free win because there was an odd number of players. So round 2 I played against Hatchiak, and this was a really grueling game. I definitely misplayed a few times because I'm not used to having Pan in the deck because I don't own the card. I was borrowing it from Jamie, and so I misplayed a few times where I could have just like dropped Pan, stolen his 8-drop Gogeta, and won the game off of it. But we still managed to win the game, or win the match 2-1, and we were playing this the same format as the regionals. So it was best of 3 with the ultimate cell deck legal, but with set 17 not legal. So a bit of a weird format, and with the new ban list in effect, of course. So we managed to win round 2 against Hatch 2-1, mostly just off of the Android 13 counterplay, stopping all of his Oceanus negates, and yeah, just slowly whittling his hand down. Anytime he tapped out, I would be dropping all my hand control stuff so that his Daburas wouldn't be live, and the same with when I had Super Namekian on the board. If I had Super Namekian on the board, I'd just drop all my hand control stuff as soon as I could so that his Daburas weren't live to replenish his hand. Round 3, I was against Reboot Cell again. Round 3, I'm playing against Josh from Team Deck Planet. And like I said before, this matchup is insanely good for AOD because you can counterplay all of their 1-drops, you can stop a lot of their draw power, and they're just not going to be able to make it to turn 5 with a hand healthy enough to drop the combo on you. And even if they are, you have Boo Unison, so unless they have a board to clear it, you just drop, you just -1 away the Cell Xeno, and then you're still fine. But this matchup, like I said, it's really good, and it's part of the reason I wanted to play AOD. and we managed to win 2-0. And to be fair to Josh, he definitely drew poorly in at least one of the games. I can't remember whether it was 2 or 1, but he did not see some androids early on, and he drew a lot of his 4 drops, I believe. So yeah, good games regardless though. And then going into round 4, I was against Janemba Mill, Mr. Peter Dance. Shout out to Peter. And this was an interesting matchup. He managed to win 2-1, so I took a game off him still. And it was mostly just because he's main decking Kami, and Kami obviously destroys this deck because it clears the entire board ignoring barrier. And I realized that, so I managed to win game 1 just because of going first, I think. And then game 2, he managed to win it. And then game 3, I overextended a little bit and I didn't respect the Kami very early on. And he cleared my board of like a Super Namekian, a Babidi, and a couple of other battle cards. And from there, I just wasn't able to recover, and he killed me. So definitely very good player, especially on Janemba Mill, and he's a very formidable opponent, so shout out to Peter. And then round 5, I was against Trunk Xeno, which I managed to 2-0. Just being able to counterplay all of their early game 2-drops that set up the warp for them with Android 13 is huge because it delays their awakening. I believe he did see the 1 thwarting in game 1 because he warped it very early on and then was able to grab it back off of one of his overarms, but just the amount of pressure that I was able to put on wasn't enough for him to withstand it. And that ended up, so that was the end of the winner box. It was only 5 rounds, but that ended up placing me at 3rd place, which meant that I got to split a box with Tom from Team Deck Planet, who placed 4th, and shout out to Tom. So yeah, we managed to win half a box from that winner box, which I was very pleased with. I didn't expect to be winning anything unless I came 1st place, so I was very happy with that. And the prizing was great, and the tournament was just great. And then going on to Sunday, I decided to stick with AOD because I felt like it had performed very well on the Saturday, especially into the matchups that I'd theorized that it would do well with, like against the Reboot Cell. And so I thought I would take it. I assumed there would be a bit more Reboot Cell and Trunks Jita on the Sunday, so I didn't want to play a deck like Blue BOUJACK, which can struggle into those matchups a little bit. So I wanted to bring AOD, and I also wanted to prove that it was a good meta call. And so on the Sunday, round 1, I'm against U7, which I was very upset by originally, because U7 is kind of a tricky matchup, like I mentioned earlier, because they can Vegeta you to clear the Babidi and the Turles, or to minus through your Super Namekian and swing into it. But in the end, I managed to take the game, or take the match 2-0. He won the dice roll and dropped Vegeta on me turn 3 every game, but what I figured was I would just hold a hatch in my hand for when he Vegeta'd me. I then used the hatch to bring back out the Babidi, and then kept on going from there, just pressuring his hand down as much as I could. He didn't drop a Unison at all, I don't think, because he was Vegetaing me on turn 3 rather than dropping the Unison, and that did mean that he didn't have so much defense, and he also didn't drop any of the 8-drops, I don't believe, because he knew if he dropped any of the 8-drops on turn 4 and tapped out, I would just kill him the next turn. So I put him in a position where he wasn't able to do any of the stuff that U7 really wants to do. So because he wasn't able to drop the 8-drops, he had to go wider, and that meant that my Android 13s were much more potent. And I was also holding them in my hand to counterplay his counterplays, because both Videl and the Goku counterplay, but their removal is on the auto, so you can Android 13 them away and stop the effect, and then still get the hand destruction from Android 13. So we managed to take that match 2-0. Round 2, I was against Green Boo, and this was a mono Green Boo, not like my blue-green Martian Boo, but it was a very interesting deck, and it focused around the Vegito Unison and using Frieza Army Healing Pod to draw 2 every time you Union Absorb. Sadly for him, this was again a very good matchup, because again it relies on getting those 1-drops out, just like Reboot Cell and just like Trunks Jita. So I was just able to counterplay all of the 1-drops off of his board. I set up Super Namekian turn 2 both games, because he was kind of forced to swing into my leader both games to get his to get his leader's effect, stack cards under his leader and draw more cards. And that meant I could awaken turn 2 both games and just drop the Super Namekian, because it's very easy to do that if you can awaken turn 2. So we managed to take that 2-0. Just Super Namekian and backing it up with Android 13s is what this deck is all about, and that's what I've built it around. But we'll be going more into that in the deck profile. Round 3, I was against Sin Shenron, and this was a very interesting matchup because I don't have any way to deal with the 9-drop in the main deck outside of Pan. And he also won the die roll, so he was able to set up the 9-drop on my turn 1 effectively going into my turn 2, and it meant that cards like Turles and the 3-drop Lord Slug became a lot more useless because I couldn't get the full value out of them. So what I ended up doing was just slowly building a board, turns 2 to 3, dropping a Turles and a Lord Slug or a couple of other guys, but never swinging into him unless it was with my leader, because I knew that he would just block and then kill my battle card, or even if he didn't block, he could swing into the battle card later on. But because yellow doesn't have much removal for cards in active mode, he wasn't really able to deal with my battle cards, and so he had to keep swinging at my leader, and he did definitely apply a lot of pressure to me. And then game 1, I dropped a Pan on his turn 4, which was when I had 3 energy up. And this meant that because he, again, couldn't remove the Pan, I was able to not only stave off some pressure, but also going into my turn, I was able to just pay 1 for the Pan, steal his 9-drop away, and then just swing into him, and I managed to kill him that turn. Game 2, I misplayed a little bit because I let him awaken a little bit too early just by swinging a load on turn 3. But this is where I sided in the Bardock Overrealm and the 2 max powers. And the Bardock Overrealm, I basically managed to stall him out with Pan and a couple of blocker negates. I had my Boo Unison, which was taking a lot of his pressure as well. So I was able to stall him out a little bit and get to around turn 5, I believe, at which point I top-decked a Bardock Overrealm for turn, and just overwhelmed Bardock, cleared up his 9-drop, his 8-drop because he'd taken dual attack with it, and the Pan because he'd stolen Pan from me with his Mechikabura Unison. And so I walked off those 3 battle cards, and then he was on, I believe, 3 life then anyways, because I'd pressured him to 4, and then he just self-awakened with a Rage Shenron. And then I was just able to swing into him a load and just able to take the game from there, because we were on turn 5, so his Haze Shenrons weren't doing anything even against the Overrealm that I dropped. So he didn't really have any defenses, and he was tapped out by that point, so I was able to take the game. And then round 4, I was against a Cell reboot, and this is a player that I know personally, Ricky, who recently started playing but is already showing a lot of signs of being extremely good. He took me down to the wire with that matchup, and I thought it was a really good matchup going into it. So definitely big shout out to Ricky, big props to Ricky. So I managed to win the game 2-1. The first 2 games were really, really weird because game 1 he didn't see any of his early stuff, so he didn't see any 1-drop androids to play, which meant that he couldn't awaken early. He didn't see his no, I think he saw his Unison, but he didn't see any of his 1-drops, so he couldn't awaken early, and he also couldn't Union Absorb because he needed the 17s and 18s in drop, and so it meant that he just wasn't really able to play the game, and I would just kind of slowly kill his Unisons whenever he played them, get a couple of Dormants out of his hand control him down, Super Namekian came down, and then just able to pressure through his leader. Game 2, I didn't see a Babidi, and so he just kind of killed me. I was set back. I think I saw a Babidi on turn 2 or 3, so I was set back a few turns there, but he was just able to pressure enough to kill me anyways. And then game 3 was really, really close. We both saw a lot of the stuff we needed to see, but he was playing around Android 13 counterplay really well. Managed to take the game to turn 5, but he didn't have the perfect 4 cell into cell Xeno combo. I don't know if that was what he was running or not, but either way he didn't have it at the time. And so eventually I just got him down to about 3 cards in hand by turn 5, and then I was able to pressure him enough to kill him. So I managed to take that 2-1, and that was my first game loss of the day, because previous to then I'd been completely undefeated on the Sunday, that is. And then round 5, I played against Trunks Jeter, and this is really where the round started getting tricky. Round 4 onwards is like things just got really stressful. So I was against Trunks Jeter, and it was the same Trunks Jeter player that I had played in round 7 of the Friday, where I dropped Android 17 on him. But we were having a much nicer game, I'd say, this time around, because I wasn't using a toxic card like Android 17. I was using Super Namekian, but at least that card has a lot more interaction with it. And these set of games really came down to the wire. We ended up going to time. So game 1, I just kind of drew the nuts. I got Super Namekian down super early. I was able to counterplay all of his Vegeta 3 drops leading up to then, so that he didn't have the out on board to the Super Namekian. And then I was just able to keep pressuring him down and just won through there. Game 2, he went first, and that meant that he could drop the 8-drop Trunks and Vegeta fusion thing on turn 3, so my turn 2. And he backed it up with like an Overwhelm and a Pan, I believe, and was just able to kill me through it. I didn't really expect him to have the 8-drop in his deck, and so it definitely caught me by surprise, because I know a lot of lists are cutting that card nowadays. And then game 3, I didn't see a Babidi again until turn 2, and I didn't see an extra card until turn 3 or 4, so I awakened super late, which was very frustrating. And he also tried to pressure me again with that 8-drop, trying to take me from 5 to 2, but luckily I had the negate that time around, because I had a Garlic in hand, I think. But again, this one came really close down to the wire. There was a point where we basically traded pans. He panned, I panned his turn, and then he panned my turn. But I used a couple of Android 13s to counterplay his riposts throughout the game, and then it got to the point where time was called. I was on 1 life, and he swung into me with his leader and comboed up, and I just about out-comboed with a super combo left in my hand, but nothing else to combo with. He tapped 3 for the last card in his hand, which was a 3-drop Vegeta, and swung 20k to my leader, and I had the super combo in hand, so I comboed up to 25k, and then on the clapback was just able to kill him because he had nothing in hand, nothing on board. So basically won the game by 5k, which was super nuts. Very, very close stuff. And then going into round 6, this was the final round of the day, and lo and behold, I am against Janemba Mill, Peter Dance, the one of the 3 remaining undefeateds, including myself and another player. And we played on stream. I'll have a link to the VOD of the stream in the description, because there were some really good games. Game 1, so I'd learned a lot from my matchup with him in the winner box. I basically completely respected Kami the entire game until the point where I wanted to kill him. Game 1, I just used a load of Android 13s to shuffle cards back into my deck, and then comboed them off on swing so that I could still maintain my Babidi, Turles, and Super Namekian on the board. And eventually I just had this massive turn where I ripped a load of cards out of his hand, and even though I was on about 4 cards in deck, I would just keep putting a couple of cards back so that I could use the Janembas to draw some more cards, and also a couple of, like, the Boo Unison plus 0 to draw more. Basically trying to find as much stuff as I could that I would put back to try and find the turn that I was trying to kill him. And then able to just pressure through and kill him, because Super Namekian puts in so much work in that matchup. Game 2, I definitely played much worse than game 1. I wasn't focusing on hand control enough when I had Super Namekian out, because for some reason I was playing around Dabura even though Super Namekian was down, so he wouldn't be drawing off Dabura. And then he also used the Vermilion Saiyans SCR, I believe it is, to warp my Babidi, Super Namekian, and Turles off my board once I'd established it, which was very frustrating. And then again I misplayed, because I didn't play a hatch on that turn to bottom deck the 3 draw rapes in his drop area. So come his turn, he had about 5 or 6 cards in hand, I believe, and he just like tapped 4 to draw 4 cards. And at that point I kind of knew I was out of the game, which was rough. And then game 3 sadly went to time, and I had just enough combo power to pressure through onto his leader to take him from 5 life to 4 life. Because he had a super combo and a Realm of the Gods extra card in hand, and the super combo wasn't live because he was on 5 life, so he couldn't get the 10k. But he'd Protector of the People that turn to 30k base on a leader, so I literally just had enough combo power to get through onto that leader to take him from 5 to 4, so that his life matched mine, and then I had a bigger board than him. And then as I passed turn, time on time was called, and so unluckily for him, that's like time just kind of won the match for me, which was definitely a shame, and I would have really preferred for it to have ended any other way, but that's just the way that it goes sometimes. And the first 2 games were definitely very long because he almost milled me out both games, so that's just the way it goes, especially when playing a deck like Janemba Mill, I guess. But overall, that is my entire breakdown for the events that I entered. So just to recap, on the Friday regionals playing Blue BOUJACK, I came 4th place. The winner box playing AOD, I came 3rd, and then the AOD gameplay on Sunday for the second regionals, I ended up with a completely undefeated record, going and finishing up at 1st place, which was obviously amazing. As I said, I wanted to prove that AOD was a good meta call this time round, and I managed to do that. Just ending 1st place kind of proves that, I think. But also proving that Blue BOUJACK is still a strong deck, and people still sleeping on it, because lots of people just don't know what it does anymore, and they need to learn. So very, very happy with my performance over the weekend. We had a lot of players in all of the events. I think Friday there was something like 120 players, I believe. And then I think the Sunday there was a lot less, maybe more like 80 players maybe, or 90, I'm not really sure, that's kind of just a guess. But definitely a lot less on the Sunday, and it was a shorter event, 6 rounds rather than 8 rounds, because there was a specific time that we had to be out of the venue by, so we had to run a few less rounds. But all in all, very happy with my performance. Managed to finish 1st place and 4th place over the course of 2 different regionals. And for those of you interested in my deck profiles and breakdowns, I will be putting those up over the next week or so, I believe. So definitely stay tuned for those. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.